Alrighty.
It's the Dev Friday Show with Mark and Tim.
All right. There was something I was thinking of saying, and I forgot what it was completely. I have no idea what I was going to say. At least I remember to hit record this week. Not last week, but 2 weeks ago, we got there early. We talked a little bit, and in the end, I forgot to hit record. So sorry for those who may have been listening to last week's episode, and you hear all of my noisy, not professional, whatever. But I don't know what's going on this week, Mark. I know it's Summer of Mark, right?
Yes, it is. The summer hasn't ended yet, Tim.
It's the Summer of Mark. Mark's out there. He's hitting the pavement. He's sending out the resumes.
I'm looking at all job opportunities which we can talk about this week.
And it strikes me as interesting because seriously, I can't remember. I thought there was something witty I was going to say to start the show off, and I just can't remember it. I cannot remember it. Oh well. But it strikes me like as you're trying to find a job, those of us who are in the tech industry know you get hit up by recruiters all the time, right, Mark? Like on LinkedIn, they're like, "Hey, constantly. I've got this position. It pays $2," and I'm like, $2 a what? The entire year, and I think you'd be a great fit for it. It's a senior, developer and manager, and I'm like, but it pays $2, right? Yep, that's what it pays. I'm like, I'm probably not interested in that. Sorry, but they'll hit you up all the time. So I was just curious, Mark. As Summer of Mark, and for those of you who are watching on YouTube, Mark is sporting a new haircut.
Ooh, I know. Well, like I said,
it's nice and tight, right? So I was just curious. In this summer, Mark, as you're looking for a new job, have you run into any recruiters, Mark?
So, I think I talked about this beginning of summer. I did talk to a couple of recruiters in the beginning of summer when I first updated my profile, and so they pinged me and had some conversations. One was looking for a .NET developer, and I was like, man, I haven't done .NET in so long. I don't know if I want to go back to it, but so that was it was a good conversation. A guy in Philadelphia who was looking at filling some positions in Philadelphia. And I was like, then Philadelphia, I worked there in the past. I commuted there. I don't know if I want to commute there again. So it was a good conversation, but I don't think it went anywhere.
I remember that, right? Because you were like, yeah, because you weren't sure about how much you wanted to loop him into the whole. I don't want to drive down there.
Yeah,
no, I do not want to do that.
So, but what's happening now, especially once you start updating your profile on all the agencies, which actually I turned down because, like I said, I'm working on getting that my final AWS certifications this month. So I pulled back a little bit because what was happening was that I was getting constant emails by these foreign recruiters. Like, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, where like they're just these seems like random emails from people feels like they're or it senses like their names from India or some type of foreign country, and they're talking about positions.
Are they looking to offer you a job?
Well, not looking to offer me. Well, they're saying, okay, this is this position in this company. This is the technologies. This is what nothing about the company.
Right.
Maybe a little bit about where the company's located, but really nothing about the company because they're just headhunters, recruiters, and they just give you some information. And there was actually a couple that I actually did respond, but I didn't hear back. So I was like, I didn't respond with my resume or anything. It's like, oh yeah, I'm kind of interested in that opportunity. Let me just give me a little bit more, and they didn't get back to me. So I was like, okay, it's weird. So I wonder if there's this kind of recruiting agency thing where they have to get so many emails out, for the jobs that they need to fill, and they're just trying to play the numbers game with it. So I started to pull back my information on the sites a little bit until I got the certification, because that's the other thing too. I didn't really want to really start sending out a lot of applications until I had the certifications on my resume. So that's where I'm at with that. But you talk about my haircut, and
wait, no, it's not. I just want to say, like, I get those emails too, but they're not. I don't get them from the recruiter side. They're saying, hey, I've got this candidate. Like, I get a lot of placement from what feels like offshore recruiters that are saying, hey, could you use some help with this?
Oh, okay. Oh, I get those too. Yeah,
Yeah.
because especially if you have an LLC registered in your name.
Oh yeah.
And you come up in business
I-
searches. I constantly get those emails.
I recently switched from an LLC to S corp, so we'll see what that
Who's
entails.
on your board of directors?
Me. It's me. I am on my board of directors. But I was so you've had some early interaction with recruiters early in the summer. I just wasn't sure if there was some confusion. I mean, a recruitment center, it may sound the same. But I'm not sure that's the same type of recruiter that you normally work with. And your haircut is making me think that maybe you've been to a recruitment center.
I said, Tim, I was looking at all opportunities. I'm getting a little bit desperate here. I'm just looking at all options, seeing what type of different career paths I could take.
You still have a job. but
I'm still actually thinking I'm preparing to go back and teach too in the fall. So.
But you're considering all options, including apparently options that have you with a very high and tight haircut. Yes.
So I do like to keep a nice tight haircut, and for those who are watching this on YouTube, so yes, I'm bald pretty much on the side of my head, showing a lot of gray on the top of my head. I still need to keep a little bit of hair up there because I am thinning, and if I make that any closer, then I'll look like I have no hair. So I try to avoid that. But I wanted to tighten up because I wanted to kind of fit in a little bit more of the environment that I put myself into last week.
Yeah, what environment did you put yourself into last week? I got an interesting text message, and I was like, well, this show's going to take a different direction.
Yeah, so I spent the week at the Army War College in Carlisle, PA.
Nice.
So I was invited to spend the week at the Commandant's National Security Program, which I know sounds really, really fancy.
Wow, that does sound very, very... Was there a ball?
Well, there was a lot of events. It was a very, very busy
like there
week.
should have been a ball at some point.
No, there was a reception. It was not like a ball, but it was kind of it was held at the commandant's, which is the commandant's just the official officer president of the college.
Right.
On the
but commandant sounds much more official.
True.
Like if you had to choose a title,
True.
you were like,
it is a pretty sweet title.
You could be president of the Army War College or the commandant of the Army. You're like, yes, I will go with the second. That is for sure.
Yeah.
So they invited you out there.
Okay. So the reason why I was invited because my cousin, he is a lieutenant colonel in the Army. He's almost retired, but he loves still kind of staying.
So is he looking for a job too?
Well, he's he's collecting a pension from the Kansas City Police Department because he retired from there.
Oh wow!
And he's still keeping his active status in the military and occasionally taking some posts and just kind of still somewhat staying active because he doesn't want to retire, even though he could retire, because he kind of likes still staying in the game. And actually, he's really good at what he does. He's actually got pretty high up, and he's working on getting his PhD because he likes the idea of teaching like me. The kind of retirement gig. He's actually really doing it for a retirement gig, but he likes staying in the military. He just doesn't want to be deployed anymore. He's not doing that anymore. But he likes to be behind the scenes strategy, still stay in the intelligence game, and so he's still into it. So he invited me because he knows that I like to talk to him about Army and military stuff when we get together. So he nominated me, invited me, so I got the ability to do that. So I knew this happened like in the early after the New Year, so I knew this was coming up, and just wasn't talking about it. So I was busy on other stuff, trying to figure out what the next career path is. So spent the week there, which is also, I do want to talk to you about how taking a week off, once you get some momentum, start some progress on a project that you're working on.
Oh yeah.
Like you go away for a week and then kind of come back. That's also something I've been dealing with.
Isn't that why all your projects now are 1 day projects? Because then you can't lose,
exactly.
you can't lose momentum on a 1 day project.
Yeah, so the week was good. It was a very busy week. Like I said, it was for the final week of the War College, like the students who are graduating from the master's program, like a master's of strategic strategy or something like that. I don't know. It's like an MSS.
The strategic strategy.
I don't know. I don't know. I forget the name of the degree, but it's the highest degree that they confer. They only confer master's degrees at the War College, but it is kind of the final degree you can get if you go to a military college. It's the kind of the highest one you can get. So during the final week of that program, they invite civilians. So about between 50 and 60 civilians from different industries all around the country to just kind of pretty much just observe their classes, just come in, sit on their classes, offer some input when you feel like you can add some input, kind of sit in on their meetings and kind of how they do the briefings and how they do the classes around the briefings. And so it was pretty interesting. So I was not, like I said, I haven't joined up.
You haven't joined? No, no.
But I did talk to somebody. I met some person who worked at Lockheed Martin. We swapped some space camp stories from back in the day, so that was kind of fun. So I met some interesting people who around the country who do some interesting things. So
Space camp stories.
yeah,
You go to space camp as a
I did. I went to space camp that's based out of Huntsville, Alabama. When I lived in Florida for a year, and I went to the one in Florida and went to one in Huntsville, Alabama when I was about like 8 or 9 years old. Really, really young when I did it because I was super into space. Thought I was going to become an astronaut like every other kid.
Right, right.
So I did that, and like I said, it brought up something. I can't remember how that came up in the conversation when I met this guy who was I found like from Lockheed Martin. That always tweaks my interest. Like, an aerospace company and military contractor. I know they could probably only say so much about what they're doing, but I just brought up space camp because like, I guess because he talked about working with Space Force.
Oh yeah, okay.
The military, like that's one of the big contractors, or the one of the big contracts that he works with is with Space Force. And it's like, I went to space camp. I had some experience there, and so he's like, oh yeah, so did I. And so we had some interesting conversations about that.
Nice. That reminds me of I don't know. You're a YouTube connoisseur, right? You watch Mark Rober's YouTubes. Mark Rober. He's used to work for NASA. I think he worked on the Rover
so many
project.
subscriptions to YouTube that I probably have seen some of his
He's interesting because he only does like 12 videos a year. But they're very he's the glitter bomb guy. If you've seen the glitter bomb,
okay,
right? Like the porch pirates are stealing stuff, and he makes it like it's got a cell phone. You open it up, and it just spins glitter and sprays fart spray, and then tracks where you are. So no, but he was trying to do, in I think it's probably more elementary school than high school. Maybe it's high school too. They have some of those projects like the egg drop project, where you see if you can cushion the egg and how high you can drop it. He wanted to just drop it from the highest spot. In fact, almost space. And his first thought was to have.
Oh, I did see this when you were talking. I did see this. Yeah.
Right. And his first plan is to have a kind of in a payload, and then have a rocket that got it back to kind of direct it back to over top these mattresses, and then just like let go of it. But it's free falling with a little rocket assist to get it in the right vicinity, and then let it drop. And he figured terminal velocity is going to be fine because they did all these tests. And they're just trying to figure out how to get the, he was doing it with, I think, BTS Space, which is another YouTuber who is kind of chronicling his own rocketry learning as he builds bigger and bigger rockets. And they're trying to figure out how to get it so they can basically get this egg back over top of their target. And I think he was talking with a friend of his who's like, well, yeah, there's a ton of people that can tell you exactly how to do that. Well, I mean, they can't tell you how to do that. He says, you know what you're building, right? You're building a guided missile, and you're not allowed to do that. But that just, I thought that when you talked about the guy from Lockheed Martin, he probably can't tell you what he's working on.
Once a year, I have the urge to go back and build model rockets.
Oh yeah,
I was super into that as a kid. That was probably my first. Well, not my first. My first maker experience was actually
like the
taking
solid
apart
state ones.
Yeah, well, where you have like the little cardboard engines you put up there.
Yeah. And then you press the little button, and it just heats up a wire. And it goes.
Yep. I was super into that for a while. Now, that's also not a cheap hobby. That's the other thing about that. So I had to be kind of limited about the size of the rockets that I made and how many times I raged or how many times I ruined. But it was a really great experience. Actually, it was a really great kind of maker craft experience. Besides my desire to take apart computers and try to put them back together again, and
right,
or electronics in general, and start to figure out how they work. Building model rockets was a really cool experience as a kid. I always like once a year I go back to, wouldn't that be fun just to go out, buy a model rocket, put it together, and go fire it off somewhere.
I did that a couple times. How many did you lose because the parachute just blew off because you didn't have the elastic?
I don't know. No, I don't think I lost any, but I did break them.
Really? Okay.
Like when they could, like if the parachute didn't deploy properly, it would just come crashing out.
Right. And then
that's something that would definitely happen. And so you lose like the fins on the.
That was it was cool, right? I remember gluing the fins on, and you learn. I think. I'm trying to think what I learned from it, and that's tough. I learned that it's cool to see something shoot in the air. That's what I learned. And you can do that with some mortar firework rounds. You're like, watch this, and boom, look at that, it blew up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember that.
Now it actually
glued on straight.
Well, now it'd be cool because if you go search on YouTube, what people are doing now, they're just attaching cameras to it. So now, if you're into it now, I know it's still probably an expensive hobby, but if you're into it now, there's so much more electronics that you could add to it. to make it even more interesting.
Well, like this BTS guy, I think that's what it is. I forget his YouTube channel. So if you're looking, just look for the kid he's not a kid. He's like college age now, I think, that's shooting rockets and he's building his own, but he's building his own flight controllers. Whereas he's trying to figure out how to do thrust vectoring, and trying to do thrust vectoring, I think, with solid state engines, which is what those model rockets are using, right?
Yep.
So he's basically throwing ceramic, like a solenoid that he's pushing ceramic material in front of the solid state engine to try to vector the thrust someplace and it's fascinating what he's doing. He's got his own flight controllers to getting his flight data and all that. So once you get to that point, I'm like, oh man, I can see how this is, you could learn a lot from this. I don't know that I learned much other than you should probably have the tube that guides it on the rod that, is on your launch pad. It should probably be straight.
Yeah,
you should probably make sure you got it all lined up and glued on straight because and your fins should probably be straight too because they're stabilization fins, right? And make sure your elastic is glued in well.
The one thing they never got to do with it, which I wanted to, because you could have I remember having like the engine,
a multi-stage engine.
Well, the little stage engine, they did have that. I think I did like a 2 because they did have like a double firing on it.
But wasn't it all in the same engine?
Yes,
it wasn't
all
like
the same
two
engine.
engines.
But the one thing I didn't get to do, which get to the point of be able to have like a multi-stage rocket where I got to have like a Saturn V or something,
like a booster where it drops off and then
or just like a multi-stage, another part of it, so it breaks off and then another engine inside of that starts up.
Right.
That's really advanced.
Did they
never
have
got
those?
to that point. Yes, they did. And I wanted to get to that, but that's a little bit more advanced. And you have to know what you're doing.
Ridiculously dangerous.
Yeah.
Because I'm just thinking of because I remember also the technology that we were playing with was cardboard.
Yep.
It's cardboard.
Yep.
So basically a charge is going to blow the top off, hopefully straight, so it's not somehow oriented down at the ground again when the next stage ignites and fires your rocket at your eyeball.
Yeah. So it just has to release the other section. But you have to have the two pieces connected. And so I was like, I wanted to get to that point, but
I'm telling you, I'm gonna send you down the rabbit hole. You're gonna find this. I think it's BTS YouTube channel, and you're gonna love it because he's building multi-stage rockets.
Yeah.
And what you can fabricate now, like think of it. I bet you could do a 3D printed rocket for those solid state engines,
which would be such a better material than the cardboard that we're using. The cardboard cylinders. Yeah.
or like like bit and piece it together, like maybe you still use a cardboard tube or however. I feel like now I'm gonna have to go do that. Now why'd you do that to me? I'm gonna
because the 3D parts would work great. You just still have to have it weighted somehow, because the nice thing about it did give you some weight for the body of the rocket, but if you did 3D printed, that could also be kind of interesting too, but depending on how the weight would be distributed. You have to just be careful about that, but it would actually, if you could actually 3D print the fins onto the actual it was perfect. Oh my gosh, that would actually solve a huge problem with the fins breaking off. Even if you had a parachute on the rocket and the rocket came down, the fins would still break, and you have to re-glue them on.
For our listener, for our listeners, I want to say, I got it right. It's bps.space. So that's the YouTube channel if you're interested in watching this. I think it's fascinating stuff.
Yep.
BPS.
Yeah,
So you're not joining the military? Is that I'm
not yet.
Sure. Not yet. Okay.
Like I said, I did talk to some interesting people. And if ever there's a military contract in my future, that could actually be kind of interesting to work on. But don't think I'm there yet. But as not
I hear the military though is really interested in like the 1-day builds. Like that. No,
the 1-day builds. Well, they definitely need help. That was a major theme of like recruitment, and you probably see this on the news. Like recruitment's just down. Like that, nobody's meeting their recruitment goals except for the Marines.
Really,
but recruitment's down all over the place. And so they actually had some interesting conversations of like, what are some ideas to modernize and change the recruitment process? Like before we get to the point of our politicians get us into another world war, which will probably happen at some point because that's what they do.
I'm glad that we're at this part of the program where Mark's all dark and stuff. It'll come back though. Don't worry, folks. It'll come back.
So before we get to that dark place, we have to reinstitute like a draft, like we did in the past, trying to modernize the recruitment process to promote more, but also to modernize such, because you do have agencies now, like you have the Space Force, or you have like the cyber. I'm not sure if it's called Cyber Force, but there's multiple actually cybersecurity agencies within the
in
the government
and different branches of the military. And
even with the government itself. Just so it's actually interesting to take a look at that. And so it seems like, so to bring, if you wanted to, let's say,
you've always been interested in that, right?
That's a little bit. I haven't like I've always been kind of attached, but I never really kind of delved into it because I did
Yeah,
have
yeah.
a little bit of a dark past when I was in high school and college doing some hacking. So I don't like to talk about that too much. I like to
Well,
leave
that's
that in the
why.
past.
And that's why you need lufamy.com,
Yes,
which is
that's something I don't talk about too much. But it's interesting them talking about modernizing the recruitment process. So to open it up to more, because if you're going to be, let's say, recruiting somebody to sit at the computer all day to do, either for intelligence or for doing like a blue team, red team security type, either penetration testing or hardening of the systems. Do you really need to be having put somebody through boot camp and to go through all the the 6 months of 6 to 9 months of boot camp to go through that process and then to actually be part of the military? Or could you, I don't know, open up a little bit more to not require that, or require a smaller component of that for certain types of agencies or certain type of parts of the military that some people work for? Also having maybe like more part-time, if you want to. Let's say if you're over 30 and you are professional in the industry and you do have a lot of skills that the government and the military could use, and you want to, let's say, be a reservist, to be like a weekend warrior, and to maybe
weekend keyboard warrior.
spend a weekend a month. Yeah. Well, it'd be like a hackathon for the military.
Yeah,
you'd spend a weekend a month, hack on some stuff for the military for a weekend, and that could be a possibility too. Because I actually think that could be really interesting.
Did you pitch that idea, or was that
no? They brought them up themselves.
Okay.
Yeah, that's actually something that's being floated around about kind of just looking at different options. Because for people like me, who I'm always been very super. I'm a libertarian. Where like I do not want us to start wars anywhere, but I'm very pro our military, where I want to, definitely have a strong military, build it up. I want people to be a part of that. I do, and I appreciate people who serve. And, there's part of me that wishes I was almost, after 9/11, I almost did it, but just some situations that wasn't able to follow through with that. Definitely would have taken a different career and life path if that actually would have happened. But there's part of me that, if I could actually volunteer for maybe once, a weekend or a week for a month or something like that, and work within my schedule, I definitely would consider that. It's a type of public service. But yes, so that was kind of interesting, which now I'm totally off track. I don't even know what we're talking
about. Well, what else? Okay, so there was the reception stuff. You went to different
it was pretty
talks there.
It was a pretty so the way that the schedule was, they would have what they call briefings or talks, but it actually was kind of interesting. They had the head
I want to go to a conference where we don't call them talks, but we call them briefings.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to do that. That sounds so much better.
It does.
I'll be going to my briefing. Yeah.
So they had the head of FEMA that works under Biden, which actually she was there, and actually that was kind of interesting. Just talking about her experience, how she got to the position, and what she's doing, how the FEMA's looking to use the military or trying not to use the military when they have to, and try to utilize other resources. Yeah, but it seems like that they can push that button a little bit too easy at times. There's also some scientists who's actually on the science committee for the president for Antarctica, which is kind of interesting. Talk about military strategy, and both from an environmental standpoint and also from who's actually putting bases on Antarctica. Yeah, that was super interesting.
Are you allowed to talk about this?
No, everything was open source. So everything was not classified anyway. So that they were forged out. But even though it was interesting, as the week went on, especially if you follow the military and kind of follow what the military is doing and where they're going, what they're doing around the world, they could hear when presenters are coming up to that wall. We're like, oh, I can't really talk about this, but if this, they kind of just allude to something where if you kind of have some general idea of what the military is doing, you kind of can fill in the blanks a little bit. But everything was not classified. It was not classified. It was just open source, so that was fine. But it was, but also later we just hearing from like 2-star generals that are coming in talking about what their strategy and hopes and what their the issues, and which I think it was interesting, where like I was in classes with some very smart people, and these are like they're all either colonels or lieutenant colonels of the military and getting their master's degree at the War College. Super smart, pretty much the top of their division or wherever they're wherever they're leading. Have a lot, and they've been in the military for most of their lives. Most of them were still on either National Guard or reservist, just trying to finish up their education, but still somewhat active in a sense, and looking into kind of do some additional kind of leadership positions. And so, but they all were venting in a sense of like, yes, there's a lot of issues with the military and how like from recruiting to how the government supports it, and also the mission that the government's giving to the military at certain times, and either for limiting or putting in places where it shouldn't be. And so they're very honest and very open. And so it was actually kind of interesting to kind of hear their opinions and their perspectives of what's going on. But yeah,
I guess
the week was super full. It was like, yeah, it was kind of from 8 o'clock to be on base to like, and I didn't get back to the hotel like between 8 and 9 o'clock at night because they had like a pretty much from classes to events that they were doing. It was a pretty full day. One interesting thing, which I said this isn't tech related, we do have to talk about a little tech in the show.
Do we?
But I did want to get you.
We kind of are. You
I do
just
because
talked
we're
about
both,
all the hacking you did as a child.
Yeah, we're both Pennsylvania guys, and so I'm sure you've been to sure you've been to Gettysburg.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they took us on a tour of Gettysburg. They took all, not the students didn't go because they've already done this.
Because Carlisle's not that far from.
Yeah, it's just like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
30, 40 minutes from Gettysburg. So I've been there a couple times, especially when I was a young kid, and definitely drove around, saw the cannons around, and saw the
go though. It's a different experience when you're being led by someone who is teaching at the Army War College.
Don't want to say life changing, but definitely perspective changing. Like, yes, it was a former graduate of the War College who helps out with these tours, and he lives in Carlisle. He's a military Gettysburg buff, and he took us. It was a combination of driving on the buses and getting out, walking around to every single point of the battle. From the beginning of the battle lasted for 3 days,
right?
All 3 days, and kind of led us through, told us exactly where everything happened, and it was a completely different perspective, different experience. And I was like, it was really, really cool, especially like the last kind of like the last charge, the Pickett's charge, yeah, the Confederate charge. We walked that, so you could see like the distance that
walked it. So you walked across the field then?
Yeah, it was like a mile, roughly about a mile walk.
Yeah.
And it gave you a good experience because pretty much is like it's a little bit of a undulating uphill type, kind of seeing what these guys actually did, what they're
right, because it wasn't just across the field; it was a little bit uphill going to the kind of quickly assembled, what do you call them, embattlements up top that they had assembled. Yeah, that's fascinating. And did he do it in a? Because I know, like, depending on how you go around the field, was it like, well, here was day one, and you kind of so he visited events in a chronological fashion.
Yeah, no, exactly. It was super chronological. It was all around the complete battlefield, pretty much in a spiral, kind of like starting from the outside, working our way in.
Right, because that's how it happened. There was what was it? It was a couple scouts that come in and they see, and then they take over a house that then becomes the headquarters. I think it was for the North. So.
It was super. It was super interesting. And then the first thing I did when I got back, I got to watch Gettysburg. I got to watch that again and kind of see what, see the just because it does give you a different perspective. Kind of really hearing it from a professional who studies this and just is crazy about it, and then does a great job of knowing the exact locations on the land of where these events happened. It was pretty cool. Which I knew that was part of the week, but I didn't really have any, because I was like, I've been to Gettysburg, we've done that a couple of times as a kid,
right.
And I didn't have too high expectations for that, but it was actually also a long tour. We got on the bus at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, didn't get back till 9 o'clock at night. So it was like the longest tour from like the moment you got on the bus, the dude's talking to you, telling you stories, and he's like totally like walking you through what led up to the battle. Also, there was a presentation before from one of the professors at the school, giving you some really good historical background information, what led up to the war. So it was like, it was really interesting.
Does he do these tours outside of like special things for the War College? I mean,
so they primarily do it for the students of the War College. So the students that are coming, that's like they do the 1 or 2 trips per year for each class, and so he helps out with those. So they break them up into groups, like manageable groups of like between 20 to 30 people that they could take around, and then he helps out and does these tours with them. But since
that seems like a fascinating thing to like be able to do if you could.
Well, he did say if they do offer, I don't know if it's free, but they do offer to let's say businesses or nonprofit groups or community groups. If they want to have the exact same tour that I did, they can contact the Army War College, I think the Alumni Association, because they're the ones that keep the connections with all the tour guides. And you could set up. But you have to charter your own bus and your own transportation, make it convenient. So those are a little bit cost involved. But if you just want to get connected to one of these tour guides that are affiliated with the War College, it's actually not hard to do.
It sounds like a great thing to do for like we homeschool, like that seems like it would be a great thing to do for the kids there. And I know a private school that has gone down to Gettysburg multiple times, and it feels like, well, yeah, get one of them involved,
Hey, you
because
got a van too? You just take
I
it.
have
Yeah,
a van. Oh yeah, I mean,
there you go.
I come with a van, but I'm not sure he wants to sneak in there, because was he in the bus with you?
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
okay, so
talking
it's
through.
like, get a bus, and that'd be awesome. That
Yeah.
would be awesome. But speaking of school, and we want to get back to the tech side. Is that what we want to do? We wanna do
Yeah.
some tech
Well,
side?
like one of the things I was challenged with, because we
Yeah?
a couple interesting things to talk about. I know the title of the show is the subscription model.
I don't even remember why.
Well, that was something we were alluding to at the end of last show about.
Oh, how you're gonna charge for your?
Well, I thought of
Was
this
that
kind of
it?
interesting thing, because I am planning on right now. I'm working on completing my certifications. I got the first one. I want to get two more, like the solutions architect and the AWS developer. I think that would be good, and especially based on the job ads or profiles I'm looking at, we're pretty much requiring those. So I don't want to be sending applications without having those in my application. So I'm working on getting that done now, but also, like I was planning on, still planning on going back and teaching. But while I'm teaching, because I'm only teaching a
While
lighter
you're
load,
teaching, okay, yeah, while you're
because
teaching,
I specifically said I'm not teaching 6 classes again. I'm only going to teach 4 classes. Try to keep them also basic classes, so I don't not too stressed. Because I do want to try to get back into consulting, contracting, and try to also build a little bit more of a portfolio back up again, which is something I've been doing for some personal projects, but I want to start working with some companies again. So thinking about the subscription model, which was interesting that we could talk about.
Oh, that's right. Yo, we were talking about that guy, that consulting guy, right?
Yeah. So there's a site that I found before, I think it was last month, called designjoy.co. So don't go to designjoy.com, because it goes to some I don't know, Japanese site or something like that, that you're not going to understand. But if you go to
But you're going to
design,
understand it as a Japanese tour guide,
so that was
an
a few
amateur
years ago.
Batman historian.
That's true. That's
Yeah,
true.
yeah.
That's true. Been on the game for a little bit, but yeah, I could have done that a few years ago. But designjoy.co, and it's a designer who started up this subscription-based business. So he basically productized his services. So I thought it'd be interesting to talk to you about this, because we have talked about, how do you, when you're working as a contractor, as a freelancer, consultant, what is the best way to get paid, or what is the best way to
With money.
sell your services? Yes. And to, do you do it hourly? Do you do a fixed cost? And how he's doing it with a subscription, I thought that was actually pretty interesting, because what I'm also thinking about doing the projects like we talked about, my no web, which I did do a little bit more work on that, and hopefully be adding a subscription model to that. My nowebcode.com.
Nowebcode.com or no eb, what I forget what it sounds like. But anyway,
nowebcode.com, which you can go use it right now. It's not very super functional, but you could definitely drop in some component boxes and start designing a page if you want to. It won't be saved. Don't do that. But hopefully once I get the saving features, that's what I was working on this week.
Free during this beta period.
Oh, this is pre-alpha, Tim. This is like 0.0001 version here online. Like I said, MVP, trying to get them, just trying to get it out there, to get something working. Because I do intend to use it for my classes, because I do want to have a no-code design tool that I could control and use with the students. But I'm hoping to add a subscription model to that. It would be relatively low cost, like, I don't know, $5 or $10 a month or something like that, just to store designs. Right, because that's one feature that had both. You could easily implement like a local storage feature to it, to store it locally in your browser, but to have like a cloud storage, like storing the documents to S3 and the images to S3, and having some type of hosting, not hosting as a website hosting, because I definitely do not want to get into that.
No,
but have design hosting where you could host the files so it could be backed up, and so I think that'd be a good service to have. So thinking about as that's more of a traditional subscription productized model, right? But how do you feel about productizing your services?
Right, because he was a subscription. It's interesting, right? Sorry, I don't know why I'm yawning.
I'm just boring you.
That must be it. Must be it. So I alluded to this a little bit when I did the keynote for tech. And one of my first talks at PHP Tech, it was the first talk that I ever gave there, was my Adventures in Contract Development, where I talked about how I modeled my contracting. And I had 3 points there, of which I probably don't remember. But it was, one of them was I'm the product. And then, because I'm the product, I charge for what I can charge for, my time. And then the understanding that means it doesn't scale, right? Like, so you can't just sell more of it. You only have so much of it. So I would even talk about optimizing a little bit of that, hourly rate concept, where you could say, well, I can book all of my hours, and I'm going to use stupid numbers, so don't try to infer any of this, right? Like if I charge $10 an hour, I'd have 40 hours a week booked all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But if I charged $20 an hour, I'd only have 30
Yep.
hours of my time. So I wouldn't be working at capacity, but I'd be making more money. And there's that
Yep.
curve, right?
Yep.
Where you want to get up as high. So I'm working the least amount of time to make the most amount of money. And that's how you optimize it when you're billing hourly. And I would talk about that. And some people come along and they talk about value-based pricing. And value-based pricing is they would go to a company and it'd be like, well, what do you need built? And we need this kind of Facebook type game thing built. It's a marketing gimmick, right? That people are going to play it and they're going to see a better product. And from the company's perspective, they knew we released this. It has a value of, I don't know, 10, 30, 40, $50,000 for us. So you can come in, you can say, to build that, I'm going to charge you $25,000. And you don't have to worry about the fact that, well, am I bid? Because that's the problem. The problem with fixed bid is, or where it becomes a problem, is when you're basically figuring out, well, I want to make $10 an hour, right? And it's going to take me $100. So I'm going to bid $1,000, or I'm going to bid a little bit more than that just in case. When you're that close, those margins, it's never good.
Well,
because you start feeling that crunch, right?
I do tell my students, because they ask me all the time
Yeah.
how much to charge, especially if they're going to be doing freelance projects. And if and clients and companies do love fixed price, and there's a reason for that, because they can easily budget for it. They can for the accounting purposes. Also, they don't have to worry about the project going over budget, right? Because they have that fixed cost in it. So they will be faced with that at one point. And if you do try to figure out a fixed base price based on what the hourly rate that you would like to have, it is a good starting point. But I do agree with you that it could definitely, there's that point in that project that if you do based off of let's say a fixed price, and if the project starts to get longer or the requests start to get a little bit more than you expected, I don't know what's called, the balance start to shift, where you'll start to feel like, oh, I'm not getting paid right for this project. I'm putting in more work than I initially anticipated, and it gets to be, and the relationship starts to get very, very strained.
Right. And that's why, from my perspective, I shouldn't say the only time, but a time where fixed bid pricing makes a lot of sense is when the value to the company vastly outweighs the effort needed to accomplish it, at least in terms of what you think that you should be making hourly, right? So again, if it's like, well, this would take me 100 hours, I want to make $10 an hour, so I would bid $1,000, but they know the value to them is $50,000, so no one's going to be upset by me saying 25. Everybody's happy. We would have paid up to this because this is the value it has for us. This is what it's going, this is what we would put into it to get out what we're going to get out of it. And then you're coming underneath that, but way higher than what you would want to make. Those situations, it's great because the company's like, hey, I know that we do this, it will have this impact on our bottom line. So you coming in and saying, well, this is the cut. Well, that's fine. That fits in our budget just fine. And it can be way more than what you would want to make hourly. That's perfect. That's the best situation. The problem with those, well, just figure out how many hours you think it's going to take you, and then give us a bid on that, is it doesn't, I mean, from the company standpoint, you don't get to make changes then. Sorry, you don't. And you usually want to in those contexts. You usually want to come in and say, hey, it would be better if it worked this way. Well, sorry, you better have got me all the specs at the beginning, because it can't change now, because I based what the cost is off of what you told me. So you told me that, then there's going to be a change request, and we're going to have to go through this process again, which is why I always did hourly. And that's how the clients I work with understood that. They're like, no. We want to collaborate around this. Yeah, so we have no idea what the end product is. You can't put a bid on it. We can't figure out what it is. We just want to say, you work for us when we're fine with your hourly rate because we know what product you're in, and that worked well. But the reason why I talked about it in my keynote for tech was you can change the way you look at it, right? And I was looking at it in a way that made sense for the types of clients I worked with. And I think the model worked great. But you can remodel the whole thing. You can think about the entire problem differently if you are looking for a different type of client. And I think your subscription model concept that you have there is a fascinating way to look at it.
Yeah, and I think what you just said, the last thing you just said about finding the right client,
Right. If you
is
can
key.
find the client that makes sense for that. But the
Trying to
problem is
match
when
that. Yep.
you have to have at least a consistent model, right? You can't
Mhm.
work with a client that has no idea what they're going to build, has no idea how much value it's going to bring to them, and say, well, we're going to do value-based billing.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can't do that. So you have to make sure that your model fits the problem that you're working with. But the thing that I was advocating for in when I gave the keynote at Tech was you can change it. Like when the
Mm.
circumstances and the situations and the context you find yourself in changes, change your model.
Mhm. Yeah.
Think about it differently. Maybe think about it in a way that's more useful for you. And encouraging the those there at the conference to say, hey, wait a second, we can change the way that we look at things for our advantage. We do it all the time. Why don't we do it about these things too? But I find that subscription model fascinating, because what he's basically saying is you're paying for my availability,
Yep.
but it's not a retainer.
Yeah, I listened to him on a podcast. He actually doesn't like the word to use. He doesn't like to call it a retainer,
Because
but
it's not a retainer, because a retainer is you're just paying me.
yeah.
So because like lawyers have retainers, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of professionals have professionals, and that you need to be licensed to do this, or you need to pass an exam or something like that. The government licenses you to practice whatever you're doing. A lot of them have retainers, and then the goal there is you pay me so much, so when you call me, I will answer the phone and then charge you.
Yeah.
And so it's not a retainer.
So his model. Let's kind of break down his model. It's kind of interesting. He has two plans. He has a standard and a pro plan on his website.
Okay, so let's just take a step back and talk. Let's just talk about that for a second.
Yeah.
Because if you've ever seen Microsoft server pricing? Just wait. Like Microsoft server pricing, they have these tiers. There's basic vanilla whatever server.
Yep.
And then there's the gold, and then the platinum, and then the whole thing. No one needs the whole thing. The chances that you need the whole thing are very, very limited. What Microsoft, I believe, is trying to do is say, if you don't want to be bothered, and you look at it and you say the cost of a Microsoft server license is $100, and man, that's all I can afford, then buy the $100. But if you're like, whatever, don't bother me with this stuff, I don't care whether it's 100 or 250. They want you to come in and be like, oh, you just make it simple. If for me it doesn't matter, and they want to capture all that. They want to say, if you would pay us 250, we would like you to pay us 250. But if you can't, we're okay with you paying us 100, but we're going to make it seem like you're getting less. You are getting less, but 90% of the people don't need the more that comes with the other stuff. We just want to say, if you would walk in the door and be willing to give us 250, we have a mechanism to capture that. And I feel like that's the same thing with your normal subscription, your pro subscription. I know you can do more. You can have more simultaneous things going, but I wonder how many of the people that pay for the pro, so you can have, is it 2 concurrent projects or something?
Okay,
2 requests?
Let's break it down. You're getting all riled up. You're getting too excited about this now. So yeah, he's 2, which, okay, I do think there's some attractive psychologically giving companies or people choices. That's right,
because somebody's going to say, I need to be able to give you more than one request.
If you just give them one plan, they're like, it's like they could check out real easy. You give them 2 or 3 or 4 plans that they have to read and kind of debate which one
for the magic number.
It psychologically engages them more into your product because they're thinking about it more. They're contemplating, they're debating it in their head.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of psychological value to there. So I understand, but he only has 2. So he has standard and pro. So it's what the standard is
1 request at a time.
So it's $5,000 a month. So you charge, this is a subscription. So it's a subscription. That's when somebody says, I want to pay for this. And if you click on the get started button, it takes you to a Stripe page and you're sign up.
You're ready to give them that $5,000.
You're signed up for $5,000 with a credit card. Then they have the pro plan, which is $8,000 a month. Right.
Okay.
So what the services that are included, you have 1 request at a time. So that's what we're talking about.
That's the standard.
Yes.
That's just to give that, I think, a little bit more context. This is saying, I'm a business working with this designer, and hey, I need a design for our new landing page for a new we're just gauging interest in this product. So here's some photos, and I can give you that request, and I have to wait for you to fulfill it before I give you the next request. Yeah, and he says he usually fulfills it within like 48 hours.
Yeah, 40 hours. So like he is a designer. He does do websites, but he uses Webflow. We talked about Webflow with no web code. It could be a better alternative. Could be a better alternative in the future for that. Like he said, he primarily does designs like logos, some packaging, business cards. He primarily just designs that he's done many times that he could basically just kind of punch out, right? So he gets like you talked about, he gets some initial art in, maybe some photos, a color scheme, a little bit of information about the business. And then he has either templates or models he can kind of throw those into and basically just pump out those designs as fast as possible. And then he's honest about that. He's tried to optimize his time and his business to a point where, like, if he gets a request in, that he tries to get that done within a couple hours or definitely within the day, right? Because he tries to actually work on multiple requests per day. So,
and I wonder too how what I want to say, how not restrictive, but like how much constraints are on a request. Because like if I'm coming in and saying, all right, we got this new product and we need a landing page to collect interest from our existing customers, whether they're interested or not. So here's some photos, here's the color scheme. It needs to, accept an email address or just they're already logged in. So they just want to click I'm interested. Build that page for me. And I also, because it's a physical product, right? I also need a mock-up of what the package would look like. I can give you the CAD that shows what our stuff, how the box is going to be. I need you to wrap it and give me that design. I can't give those two to you at the same time because they're two different requests, right? So I'd have to give you one and then wait for you to finish that before I give you the other, unless I'm a pro subscriber.
Which you have two requests at the same time. Yes.
So, but that's where I'm really thinking it's just like, what if we want to have two requests? Well, then let's just, like, I wonder how many people actually do the two requests, and all he's really doing is saying, if you can only pay me $5,000, I'm okay with that. But if you could pay me $8,000, I'm more okay with that. All right. So I wonder how many of these people actually put two requests in the pipeline, and if they do, is it even delivered quicker?
Okay, so getting back to what's included. Okay, so we're talking about one request at a time,
right?
Average of 48 hours for delivery. So that one request that's going to get put in the stack there that he's going to work on. He's going to say it's going to get done within 48 hours, which is good. 24 to 48 hours. You could have unlimited brands. So if a company has multiple products, multiple brands, he doesn't differentiate.
This is great for consulting, or not consulting firms, but for like web shops.
If he has to work with, let's say, 20 or 200 people at a company for stakeholders or managers, contracts. He says unlimited. He doesn't care. He'll work with as many people as possible. He has his own Shutterstock subscription, so he'll gets all the stock photos for free. So that's also included. So he does a pretty good job limiting. But you're right. The big difference between the standard and the pro is the request. So he uses Trello.
Right, and they just come in a backlog of a board.
He has like a Trello board that basically he just gives per company, and then he template board that he can just create quickly, and then that's already set up. And then the company then will they'll fill up the backlog stacks, and they'll move them over to the working stack, and that'll be the one because they can only have one job task within that working stack that he's using.
So I can still have a backlog even with standard. It's just you only can have one in the working stack versus two. So if I really want to get something done quickly, I might need the pro to be able to have him do two things at once, because I gotta imagine there's another concept of a queue somewhere where it's then my request and everybody else's request, and where does that all fit? And how long is it going to take you to start on my request if I can't put it in? Because if when I put it on my to work on, it really goes to the end of whatever your full list is.
Correct. So that's why he tries to manage it so that he's definitely going to work on multiple companies or multiple projects a day, but he tries to prioritize them so that he can get it done within 20 to 48 hours to make sure he can get that turnaround time, because he knows that turnaround time is key, especially if you're going to be offering this high priced per month subscription. Getting it turned around fast back to the company, that's one of his key selling points. He could do that, because if he doesn't do that, then they're not going to see the value there as much, right? So the value is how fast the designs can be turned around. He did talk about that if it is larger projects, like you alluded to, like if it's a website or web application, he's not a developer and he just uses Webflow. So if it, let's say, is a website or responsive, or maybe a web mobile app that he's doing on Webflow, and it's a longer project, then he'll be upfront about that with the company and say, okay, we need to break this into multiple tasks or multiple phases,
requests, basically,
but just have some expectation that maybe one of these phases is going to be longer than 40 hours. So he communicates that with the client.
But it would be natural if you're splitting it up. It'd be natural, because you're like, you can't. You're gonna keep sticking them in,
Which-
and it's
which I
another
think,
48-hour
well,
window.
yeah, and we talk about that in a lot.
Yeah.
You know, breaking things down into smaller deliverables
Makes sense.
is good. It's good for both sides, right? It
Yeah.
makes you feel like you're accomplishing and you're pushing forward the project, and also there's value then returned back to that. So one thing that when I was listening to him on the podcast, he talks about is going back to the finding the right customer, because before doing this,
Mhm.
he's within the same position that I was in the past, probably me, maybe you were in too, and where you start working with the wrong clients. In a sense where, especially when you first start off, I tell my students about this, that when you first start off, you definitely have to build a portfolio. You have to pretty much accept any project just to get your foot in the door and build some experience. But then once you get to the certain point, you have to be comfortable and be knowledgeable of the fact of like, you might start working with clients and might start to take advantage of you, right? Take advantage of your time.
Mhm.
Especially if you are working on fixed price projects where the client's just going to give you multiple requests. And he talks about that. Like his experience before doing this was that he would just work with clients who would just inundate him with requests, especially clients for lower price projects.
Right. So he'd go in it with like hey, this is going to cost you so much to design this webpage. And they'd be like, oh yeah, cool. That's great. Let's do this. And then it'd slowly sneak up and it'd be like, hey, can you put this at we need to add this to the page. We need to add this to the page. And it's like, wait a second.
Yeah.
You're not building the page. So I get his motivation there. It's just like, fine, just pay me this every month, and you can bother me with as many change requests as you want, just one at a time.
And he's looking for a specific level of company too. So a company that is not going to have too much qualms about putting in the credit card for a $5,000 subscription for one contractor and just be signed. Now it is month to month. He doesn't lock anybody into like a year term.
Yeah, it looked like he said he's fine with pausing it. You know.
Yeah. And so, but he says that on average, and he occasionally has some people that companies that pause it. On average, he averages around 20 clients. So 20 clients at between $5,000 to $8,000 a month.
Ridiculous.
That's over $1 million.
That's ridiculous.
That's why this got picked up on Hacker News, and this actually he got a little bit of word about his business, because it's like to actually find out that actually, and he said the companies, if you find the right companies, they have no problems paying the money.
Right. Because it's like your value to them. If you don't need a full-time designer, and you can just pay $5,000 to have a designer who does a pretty good turnaround all the time, right? Because if you don't need a full-time designer, you need a designer that you also have doing other things.
Or even think about the cost. But this from the contract experience. If the company can pay, they're paying $5,000 a month, let's say over 12 months, that's $60,000. $60,000 is much cheaper than paying, let's say, 85 or 120 or 100 or whatever that's full salary is, on top of maybe with benefits too.
Yeah, and the overhead of employment, versus contracting. And then again, if like the model he's out is pretty much, you can just keep giving me tasks. Just give me one task at a time.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's an ebb and flow there that makes it very
he does say that
nice
he's upfront saying there's some clients who they'll give me like a task every day, or and really start to stack them. There's other clients who they pay them $5,000 a month and give them one task a month. So think about that. Just doing like one day of your time for $5,000 a month for one company. There you
go with the value. But then it comes back to like that value concept, right? I'm guessing for that company, the value is we don't have to find another designer. We don't have to shop out each one of these things and say, okay, who's going to work on this? And we just know that he'll always pick up the phone.
Yep.
So it has a bit of that retainer model without being called a retainer. And because he's not charging above the retainer, it's not really retainer. I get that. But it's just like, nope, we just want somebody that's here and available.
Yeah. Time and consistency. I think that's such a huge thing.
Yeah.
Which I try to instill to my students, but it's hard when you're young. It's something you just kind of have to learn by going through some projects and dealing with a variety of clients. But yeah, that's such a huge thing. And that's also what these companies who are willing to pay good money for these projects, and no qualms paying $5,000 to $10,000 for a project or for somebody.
I myself, like when I need illustrations for my projects, I have no qualms paying $5 to $10 to maybe even sometimes 20 on Fiverr.
but if they know that $5,000 a month is going to get them something back fast, and it's also going to be a certain quality level that they're happy with, that meets their standards, then they have no qualms paying the money.
And I'm sure there's some like design consistency too. It's like, oh yeah, we know this is our design. Like, it's going to have a similar look and feel. And no, I can see the value there. So I'm just trying to figure out how I can charge someone $5,000. Let's see, if I did a subscription model, it's like you can talk to me for an hour every week, and it can only cost you five that like 1 hour every week, anytime. Like, and that's just five. I wonder. Yeah. We'll have to see about that. See about that.
Yep.
So you're gonna
Maybe
launch a
maybe you could sell
design subscription service?
Maybe you could sell yourself. You could sell yourself as a podcast host. So you could productize your podcast hosting capabilities.
I will host your podcast. I don't know why.
Yeah, for 1 hour a week.
Yeah,
pay me $5,000 a month,
Jeez.
and we'll do four podcast episodes.
There you go.
a month
about your product.
About
your stupid product. So I mean, your amazing product.
Hey, you laugh at that. That actually is. That sounds like somebody would definitely pay for that.
You know what? You're the designer. Throw a page up there. do one of those launch rock pages or whatever, you know.
Like I said, this is super interesting because I'm thinking about the type of projects consulting I want, especially around AWS services. Now, like I said, I'm still kind of probably
subscription, you know, like a subscription AWS solution architect type thing.
Or think if I could figure out a way to. That's why I've been, you know, spending a lot of time with the CDK. Getting really, really good with that because I think that's a real huge time saver, especially for deploying your infrastructure, managing your infrastructure with code. But if I could figure out a way to maybe, narrow my scope of what I provide, because like I said, AWS is huge. There's no way, right? But if there could be like a let's say a set of those services that I could productize in a sense, saying, okay, I could deliver, let's say, features or requests based around these services and pump them out within 48 hours. I think that is kind of interesting. That's something I am thinking about.
It's an interesting model.
Like narrowing it down, which also one thing I like about his site too, which he doesn't talk about himself at all. And usually when you have, let's say, contractor websites or portfolio websites and you want to sell your services, talking about yourself is always kind of an important thing. And talking about your experience, your education. Like he has some logos of companies that he worked on and some recent portfolio of works that he's done, but he doesn't talk about it. But he's honest the fact of like, it is just him, but he doesn't give his name at all.
No, and it's far more about this is what you'll get from this. You'll get a consistent design. It'll happen in generally 48 hours, you know, pretty much whatever you want, as long as it's within this design constraint, right? Like I'm not going to build you an application, but if you need screens for your iOS app or you need, you know, I will do that. Yeah. It's very much about the product, which is his output, not him. So again, like not the way I looked at contracting, but you can change the model of how you look at things. To your advantage, and it can be. I mean, I've seen people go from the value-based pricing back to the hourly pricing because the clientele they were working with changed, so they had to, you know. And it doesn't work to approach a client who doesn't have clear constraints and clear value for what you're doing, or understand that this is, you know, we know that this is going to be the value to us. You can't do value-based pricing with them because you're missing that part. So being able to change your model based on your client and where you find yourself is super valuable.
And I think going back to what you talk about finding the right client. You know, the one thing I really like about this model is that it kind of really forces you to find the right client from the start.
Right.
Because you don't have to go back and forth, and you know, if you want to go back on Upwork and start putting in a lot of applications and set up a high hourly rate, you're still going to get some like weird relationships and weird clients are going to be contacting you. It could go down some real paths. But if you kind of set the bar high in a sense, and
you could do that with the hourly rate too.
Yeah.
You know, setting your hourly rate to not $10 an hour gets rid of a lot of clients you don't want to work with.
It's true. Say,
you know, that's how that works. It doesn't get rid of them all, because there's still those ones that are like, would you take $10 an hour? And you're like, no, I wouldn't. Nope. Sorry, not going to happen.
Yep.
Well, what's the shop here? Here's the thing. I was gonna float, but maybe we'll do it next week. We haven't talked about AI in a while, have we?
Oh, we have not. Which I do have another AI project that I'm working on. So
you're working on an AI project. This is what
we could definitely talk about that next week.
It might be interesting because I have I am finding ways to use AI from an education standpoint. I'm sure there's plenty, and you know this, right?
Yep.
There's plenty of concern about what this means. Are students just going to be able to write a paper using AI? And I think honestly, I've had discussions with people in education about this, with you as well. I think it's an indicator that maybe writing papers is just a part of understanding whether somebody's learned something and not the only way to determine if they've learned something. But yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of students that are using AI to try to do those assignments. But on the flip side, we've been playing with using it as much as, or I'm trying to figure out how to use it as much as I can to make homeschooling easier. from a teaching standpoint.
Yep.
Leveraging it to help us figure out how and what and just find it. And it's actually been pretty fascinating. The thing I'm running up against right now is the fact that ChatGPT read everything up to what, 2021.
Are you paying for the that got updated with the GTP4? It's a
Did
little
it?
bit more. Yeah, I thought it.
It's
more
still, I
recent.
think it still starts at 2021 because
Okay.
we'll talk about it next week. Because I run into things where it's like, hey, use this, and doesn't exist anymore, right?
Hmm.
But
Okay.
but it's been interesting to play with. So maybe we'll talk about that next week.
I'm
ChatGPT can be used in school.
I'm a full agreement because I think in the future, Tim, the teachers are all going to get replaced by AI.
Yeah, that's it. We're just going to be, my teacher's a computer.
And to do
The
that,
AI teacher.
they may go to sensei.net.
What is this? Another Sensei? Is this another one of your one-day projects? How do you even spell it? Sensei.net.
I don't have it online yet, but yeah, this domain I do have. Yeah.
Of course it is. Of course it is, because Mark is a subscriber. Domain of the club.
Domain
of the club month. Domain of the month club.
I'll talk about the story about how I came up with that name. We'll do that next week.
Sensei.com. All right.
No,
right.
.net.
.net. Oh, .net. Yeah. It's a network. It's a network of senseis. Whatever senseis
That's right.
are.
Create your own sensei.
All right. Well, I'm gonna end this stream. I'm gonna end the stream so I can retitle this